So for this lesson, we're going to do some simple tools and create simple objects. So we can do things like pendants. So basically, a lot of times you're going to be using the curve tools to draw objects, and then from those curve tools, you want to extrude them, and then that will give us our 3D model. So an example, if I use the curve tool circle, and these, if you read it in the command line here at the top, it'll tell you what to do. So center of circle, so my center of my circle is going to be 0, which is the center of the screen. I'm going to type 0, enter, and then it's going to start my circle from the center there, and then I'm going to draw a circle. So let's say, if you look at the command line, it says diameter, so I'm going to type in the diameter of 25, so 25 millimeters. So my circle here is now 25 millimeters or 1 inch. And to create a simple flat pendant, I can just grab that circle now, and I can do extrude. So I can type extrude in the command line. So extrude curve, enter, and then here you'll see I have the ability to do an extrusion, and this will give the object thickness. So extrusion distance right now, the distance is up and down. So I can go to the command line and we can do both sides. No. Solid, yes, because we want a solid object when it's extruding. So I want to type in the extrusion distance to be, let's say, 2 millimeters. 2, enter, and we have an extruded object, 2 millimeters. So if I go to shaded, I can see it. Okay, so this is our, let's say, simple circle pendant. Now with this, we can also put text on this. So let's say we want to add text. I can go to text. Oh, sorry, here. And then I can type in a phrase. So let's say Rhino3D CAD. Okay, and then I can place it up here. Oh, so right now it's doing it as a solid object. There's nothing wrong with that. I prefer to do curves, and usually for jewelry we like to use Arial black, just so it's just bolded and it has enough thickness so that when you're printing it, it comes out in your casting. So go curves, click OK. There. So next thing I do, I'm going to scale this down. So I can hold Shift, grab this gumball here. So the gumball, if you don't have this come up, so if I select an object, if you don't see this come up, down here at the bottom it says gumball. So you can turn this on and off. Okay. So this gumball will allow you to scale, rotate, and move. So if you click on the arrows, it does allow you to move in the axis it's pointing in. Okay. And if I grab on, so on the opposite end of the arrows, there's these little squares. So if I grab these little squares, it allows me to scale. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to scale this in. So if I hold Shift, it'll scale in 3D. And then I'm going to position it on top of my circle pendant. Okay, so I know this is 2 millimeters thick. So I'm actually going to click on this arrow here and type 2. And it's going to bring it up 2 millimeters. So it's lying flush on the surface here. Another thing you want to do is kind of check the thickness here at the bottom. So we can type in distance and click on the corners here. So I'll click here and then click here. And in the command line, it'll tell me it's 0.515 millimeters. So that should be fine. In order for things to print properly and cast, your letter should be a minimum of 0.3 millimeters. Another thing is you also kind of want to adjust the spacing here. So they should be about 0.3 millimeters apart. This right now is 0.15. So depending on the quality of the printer, this may be fused. So depending on like what it is. So this is like an extrusion. So if I type extrude, and then I want to extrude this above the surface. So let's say 1 millimeter above the surface. This here may or may not come out. It may come out as merged, or it may come out separated. It just depends on the printer. So if I want, I can slide this over a little bit, and then I'll have something that's I'll know it's going to print for sure and cast. Okay. Now something else we can do. So rather than, so I'm just undoing this Control Z, Control Z. Something else we can do is I can grab these letters, and let's say I want to do, instead of raised lettering above the surface here, I want it to be cut in. So it's embossed in. So I'm going to extrude curve again. And this time, instead of saying both sides no, we can do both sides yes. And I'm going to go 0.5 of a millimeter. So now it should go up 0.5 and below the surface 0.5. So if I click the R, you'll see it's extruded up and below the surface. So in order for me to cut this, what I'll do is type Boolean Difference, enter. Now if you read the command line, it says select surfaces or supply surfaces to subtract from. I'm going to click on the circle pin because this is what I want to cut. So enter, and then it's going to say select surfaces or apply surfaces to subtract with. I want to select the letters I have here, and it also says delete input object. Yes, because I don't need these letters after I've cut the circle. So enter, and as you can see here, it's cut the letters out. And the reason why we do 0.5 is the same reason why we have certain thicknesses here. If it's not that deep when you start grinding and finishing this piece, let's say they take off 0.1, you have 0.4 millimeters depth. Some people are a little bit heavy-handed, maybe it's going to be 0.3 millimeters. So if it's not thick enough, when it's finished and done, you may or may not see the letters here. So just to show you some other curve tools, so now we just did a simple circle and we extruded that. Let's say I want to, I don't know, let's see. Let's say we draw a flower. Another great tool we can use is called arc direction. So this one here. So I can draw an arc. So basically you do the start of your arc, end of my arc, and then you pull out to create the arc itself. Click on this. So this I want to mirror. So I can mirror. Right here, or we can type mirror in the command line. So click mirror. You have the option here to, so it says start a mirror plane in the command line. You have the option to mirror along the X or Y axis. So for this, I'm going to mirror along the Y axis. And now I've got my mirrored object. We can adjust this curve. Make it larger, make it smaller. Now as you can see, because when I move or adjust this line here, this other line moves as well. The reason this happens is because we have something called history. And if yours doesn't change, it doesn't move, if you're following along this tutorial, you can go here, record history, and just make sure this is on. So when that's on, then it will move with the original curve you do. So usually the way I reference this is this is the parent curve and this is the child curve. Over time, you'll get used to tools that have history and which ones don't. So now I've got this petal shape. I'm going to select both these curves and do something called trim. I'm going to trim out these ends here. Enter, and then join. So if you read the command, it says two curves join into one close curve. So I'm going to move this, and if you were following the other tutorials, I did an array polar. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extrude this. Oops. Curve. Click on the curve, enter. And let's say I want this to be 1 millimeter thick up and down because it's extruding both sides. So it gives me 2 millimeters total. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything. So remember, selecting in box select, if it's dotted, as long as it's selecting a piece of the object, then it'll select it. If you're going the other way from left to right, the whole object has to be within the box to select. And then bring this down. And then we're going to use a tool called array polar. Oops. Array polar. Enter. And it's going to ask for the center of my polar array. Center is 0. Enter. And number of items. So let's make this a 5-petaled flower. And then here, angle to fill, 360. Enter. And enter again to complete. So there's my flower. Now to finish this, what we can do is we can select everything and click Boolean Union. We can type Boolean Union, or we can click it here. And what that will do is it'll make it all one piece. Okay. Other curves we have here, curve tools, are polyline and single line. So single line is we use just kind of to draw a single line, pretty straightforward. Using it for if you need to trim anything, split something, or just join and close some curves if necessary. Polyline, like its name states, so it's basically single lines joined together. So if I click here, click twice, I can keep clicking, keep creating single lines joined together, and that makes up my polyline. And then the next one is intercurve. So just make sure you get the right curve tool here. So we have the interpolate curve and we have control point curve. I find that interpolate curve is easier to use for me just because where I click is kind of like where the line's gonna go through. So each point, that's where the line's gonna go through, and I find that it's just easier to see and draw lines. Now there's some people who have used, let's say, Illustrator. The other one would be this one, control point curve, and I can't really explain this, but the points here are creating the arc. So I don't really like this, but I know some people do use it, so just showing you this curve here. Okay, so interpolate points. So one reason we use this is because we may make a cathedral ring and do a sweep. So if you were following along on the first tutorial with the single band, I'm going to just do something quick. I'm going to draw a circle from the top view. So 0 is the center of the circle. And let's say I'm doing it for a 6.5 millimeter gemstone. So I'm going to type 6.5 for the diameter. And finger size. So we'll do a size 6.5 finger size, which is going to be 16.9 millimeters. So on my front view, I'm going to grab another circle. Sorry, that's 0. And that's going to be again 16.9. Okay, so let's do a quick, let's say bezel, or let's do a 4-prong head. What I'm going to do is use single line. Draw out a single line like this, and then type pipe. So for a 6.5 millimeter gemstone, I want the diameter to be about 1.3 millimeters, and I hit enter, you'll see here in my perspective view, this right here is flat topped. Now, I personally don't like that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do pipe again. And where it says cap, I'm going to make sure it says rounded. Enter. And there. Now I have a 1.3mm pipe with a rounded top. Now if you notice, it's going through the finger rail here. That's fine because we're going to use a Boolean difference to cut that off. Now this prong, what we're going to do is we're going to go and type in array polar. So center my array polar, 0, number of items, 4, 360 degree rotation, enter. So that's what I want. I want 4 prongs. If for any reason you want to change that, you can go to items, type a different value. So let's say you wanted 8 prong head, type 8. So let's go 4, enter. Now the orientation, I don't want this. I want to rotate this prong here. So if you remember, we used pipe on this line here. So because we have history, what I can do is I can just rotate this line, and then it's going to move the pipe. And because I used array polar, which also has history, the other prong should move with it. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to rotate. And center of rotation is going to be 0. Angle, so I'm going to rotate this 45 degrees. Enter, and voila. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is create gallery rails on this. So this curve here that I drew, I can type pipe. And it doesn't have to be nearly as thick, so let's go 1mm. And I will scale this down. I'm going to make another one below it. So what I can do is grab my circle curve here, click on the arrow while holding Alt on the keyboard. I'm going to click on the arrow and drag down. I'm going to use the scale, hold Shift, scale this inwards since this prong arrow is down at the bottom, and I'm going to type pipe again, 1mm. So now we have our first setting. Okay. And again, we'll cut this out after we've created the shank. So now I'm going to do my cathedral ring. I'm going to use the intercurve or interpolate curve. Snap to the bottom here. So if your snaps aren't working, snaps are down here at the bottom left. Make sure your O snap is turned on. If the O snap is turned off, then the snaps will work. So turn this on and you'll get your snaps. So for this, we're going to use a quad snap. So it snaps to the bottom of this circle. And then I'm going to turn on near snap. So we snap to the circle itself. And then draw a slight arc here. So if you notice here, it's snapping to all kinds of stuff. I don't want this. So what I can do now is I can turn off my snaps. And we have a nice arc here. So what we call cathedral. Now the next thing I need to do is create a profile shape at the bottom here. So I can sweep it to create the actual shank. So I'm going to go to my right view. I'm going to draw a rectangle. And command line click on center, rounded. I'm going to snap to the bottom here. So I'm going to click O snaps, turn them back on. And width, so let's say this is going to be 2mm in width. Enter, and then the height, let's go 1.7. Enter. And then we'll drag the cursor here to get the rounded corners. Click on that, and we're going to move from the top here, so mid of this line here, down to the quad. So just to confirm everything worked, we'll go to perspective view, rotate this little, so as long as this bottom of my profile is touching, or you can say in this view top, is touching the center or quad of the ring round. Next, what we're going to do is call sweep. So we swept a band on the first lesson. I'm going to grab this line here, and I'm going to do sweep 1. Enter, and it's going to say select cross section. So this profile here that we drew is our cross section. And click on this, enter to complete, enter again, and OK. So now I've created my cathedral. So I kind of don't like how this here is protruding out. What I can do is turn on control points. So points on. So right here, or you can actually just type it in here as well, points on. So I'm going to grab these points here and bring them in. And sweep has history as well. So if I move this line, the sweep will adjust to it. Oops. Okay, undo. Okay, now that I've created half of my shank, so I'm going to mirror this to the other side. So I'm going to click on mirror along the y-axis, enter, sorry, and click, and then once I do that, I'm going to click these two sides, click join, click OK, and last cap. And then I'll cap the top here so it's closed. So another tool we can use just to round off these edges here is called Colette. So fillet edge, click on this edge, click on this edge, enter. We can see how much here to fillet, so I don't want it that rounded there. So 0.2, so what I can do here is set all 0.2, enter, and it's going to round that out. Last but not least, we need to create a bridge. So I showed you how to extrude, so what we can do is something called offset. So I can type offset. And this will do create a parallel or offsetted curve from whatever curve chosen. So this the ring rail. I want to create a offsetted curve that's about 1 millimeter. So now I have this second curve here. I'm going to click on the inner ring rail, this outer curve. Go to my right view and I'm going to type extrude. So extrude curve. I'm going to extrude it so that it's within the cathedral shank here. And last but not least, we need to just cut out, cut these prongs. And I don't like how my this extrusion that we just did is going through the center here, so we're going to cut that out as well. So to cut those out, we need to create cutters. So I'm going to grab this curve here and do an extrude. So we can only do booleans with objects, so that's why I'm creating an object to cut another object. So this extrusion here, we're going to use this to cut the prongs, and then I'm going to go, if you remember, we used a pipe to create the lower rail here. So this, the original curve we had, I'm going to grab that and extrude that. So it's going through the bridge. So there we go. So now I have two cutters. So if you go to layers tab here, I can add new layer. So right click on this and then do new layer. I'm going to change the color of this. I can just do this orange. Click OK. Select these two objects. Right click here. Set. Not set. Sorry. Change object layer. So then those I can say are my cutters that are orange. So I'm going to click on the bridge. I'm I'm going to do Boolean Difference, or another way of just going to Boolean Difference here. Subtract which object am I subtracting from, which is the bridge. Enter what am I subtracting with. This here, this orange cutter I created. And then delete input, yes, because I don't need this cutter once I've cut. Enter. So now that bridge has been cut, so now I have a hole here. And then last, let me just cut these prongs. I want to go and do, sorry, cancel. I'm going to do Boolean Difference. So this one I'm going to just type in the command line. What am I cutting? These prongs. Enter. What am I cutting it with? This here. Enter. And it's been cut. Now, I think you've noticed this history warning. So basically it means I've broken the history. So when you move a parent object, the child should move with the parent. When you break history, that means whatever you do to the parent object, the child object won't move. So I've broken history on these prongs. And if you remember, when I had moved the original first prong I created, this one here, everything would move. Now if I move this now, nothing's moving, and that's because I've broken history. And we've broken history because I've modified these. Okay. So that's our Cathedral shank. So we used simple tools such as the single line, polyline, interpolate. So using different types of curve tools, we're able to sweep and extrude to create solid objects. So from there, that ends our lesson. See you in the next video.